Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 18 of The FYX. We are keeping on with the entrepreneurial theme for the second week in a row. Last week, we caught up with Mo Wadwani, the founder of Jersey-based fitness apparel company Athletic, alongside of his wife and his two amazing kids. And this week, we are kicking it over to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I had the opportunity a few months ago, actually, to sit down with Joe Tebaldi. Joe is the founder of a really interesting company called Flexx, and he specializes in website design and CRM. For those of you out there who are like, what the heck does CRM stand for? It's customer relationship management software, so tools that generate things like lead generation, communication with current and potential customers, and that sort of thing. And he's also in the process of really developing a fascinating product that I'm very excited about and see a huge future for with my Fitness Fix and Fix brands. And we'll let him dive a little bit deeper into that as we get through this conversation. And that's called Studio. So if you're somebody out there who is a fitness professional and you listen to this today, I would encourage you to listen all the way through, because as Joe and I joked with each other throughout the episode, we sat down with the intention to talk specifically about his product, but I really think he's the type of guy that has such a fascinating perspective based on the job experiences he's had, the life experiences he's had, just how he identifies as a former athlete, how he identifies within the fitness space, the way he is as a thinker, and then applies that to how he looks at life. And one of the biggest themes that comes out of this conversation, my key takeaway at least, is this idea of friction. And Joe does a really good job of getting into it and talking about how friction is something that we experience in our lives. And of course, it makes us uncomfortable. And it's super easy to feel very uncomfortable in the moment and then only to move on from it 6 months later, 2 months later, 2 days later, however long, and be like, hey, I grew from that situation. And I think that is a really good opportunity to just kind of give you something to think about today as you're listening to this, going throughout your day, maybe wrapping up your day, and just reflecting on when's the last time you felt uncomfortable about something. Did you try to run away from it? Did you try to lean into it? And how long did it take you to really accept it for what it was? And rather than fight it, see what you might be able to learn from that opportunity. With that, I'm going to move in a totally different direction and let Joe take the floor and talk about Studio, which is his really exciting product that will essentially become, in my opinion, and I'm excited to see this happen, a platform for fitness professionals to really have one place to grow their brand without having to piece together their Instagram following, their Facebook interactions and experiences, podcasting, what have you, maybe even business development opportunities and the like, and really kind of create one place and one ecosystem, I think was the word I used when we first recorded the podcast, to interact with current clients, potential clients, and really grow an online fitness community. So Joe, I am calling you out right here because at the end of the episode, I challenged you to tell me where you think you're going to be in the next 12 months. So by the end of 2021. And we recorded this on December 31st of 2020. So it was New Year's Eve, the last day of the year that a lot of us probably wanted to forget, as we joked. And we also tongue-in-cheek mentioned, oh, it's New Year's Eve and here we are recording this, no days off. And that kind of rolled us into the entrepreneurial conversation and the spirit behind that. But I asked Joe where he pictured Studio moving to over the course of this calendar year. and we're almost 5 months in. So Joe, if you're listening, this is a little gut check for you and a little opportunity for you to take an audit. And I know you're the kind of guy who probably does this often, to see where you're moving in the direction of building out this platform. And I think it's really interesting for anybody out there as an entrepreneur themselves. If you're eager, or you feel like something's taking too long, or you feel like you should have been at a different point by now, Joe's perspective is an amazing reminder that there's a learning opportunity at every stage. And if you truly want something and you want to go after it and you want to go get it, it's important to work hard, but there's also time to sit back and be patient and really learn everything you can and soak up as much knowledge as possible from any given situation, people who provide you feedback, just being in that mindset of like, I'm here to collect as much data as possible. So with that, let's kick it over to Joe and get right into episode 18.
So for my background is I started as a baseball player for the longest portion of my life. So I've been working out, and I had a personal trainer when I was 14. So I've always been in the fitness world, not necessarily always delivering it, but always doing it. So that was always my background and always my scope. My perspective of life was that everybody was doing this, and I was just one of them. So I always wanted to be in development because my older brother was in development, and he had sold a company when he was young and had retired, and it was like very...
So is there a big age gap between you guys?
About 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of grew up as an only child, but watching him and my sister like almost act as adults that I knew, right? So he kind of blazed the path for like, ooh, I really like this idea of development. He actually got me hooked on one afternoon. He had his computer up, and he had a little screen, a window that says, "Does Joey smell?" on it. And I was young. I was like, they was just calling me Joey. So I was probably like 10 or 11. And this thing pops up on the screen and says, "Does Joey smell?" And if you go to click yes, it chases it around the screen and you can never click on it. So that kind of got me addicted to like, ooh, 7? It's creative, right? I'm like, oh, wow, he was able to think something and then create something that somebody interacted with. So I always got obsessed with that. So I originally went to school for development. Had to drop it because of baseball, because they required me to be in a lab for certain times, and I couldn't make it because of baseball, so I had to choose. Baseball was paying for school, so I made the choice I had to. But I always tried to stay in touch with computer science in some way. Okay. And bounced around schools a little bit, graduated, ended up kind of finding myself back in development after school because I just missed it so much. And I was working at a bar and Walgreens at the time. And my bar owner was installing a bunch of craft beer lines and had trouble keeping up with the menus. And that's when I injected myself back into app development. I was like, I think I can create a piece of software to help you. And created a piece of software in Visual Basic with an Access database. Wasn't online. It was just running on his computer, and he used it for 4 years.
That's so cool.
And it was then that I was like, I feel like I got a knack for like figuring out what people's problems are and then solving them with software.
Very cool.
And then you kind of mentioned my path since there. So I started as in software for special education. And then I jumped over to a little bit more fitness, and really that was like a media sport development. Okay. And now I'm started my own company a few years ago to kind of do kind of all different things in fitness, but focus mainly right now on digital.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as you know, my famous second question is, what is your go-to coffee order?
I feel like I need to be a little cliche. Okay, like caramel brulee lattes are kind of my thing. And it's really the only treat that I have that has like a lot of sugar in it. Okay. Other than that, I'm a red eye guy. Nice. So I like black coffee. I like to just be minimal as possible, because I don't like the idea of going somewhere and not being able to find something you like. Yes. And if you get addicted to like a creamer or something like that, like you have to have it with every coffee. And now
have you seen the new Chobani creamer?
I've not.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Don't change my life right now. Okay. I just need black coffee.
I literally might change your life, but here's the thing. It could be cursed because that's the coffee that spilled all over my computer. So
oh yeah, keep that out of here.
I was telling a friend that I spilled it, and he was like, oh my God, is that the creamer that you put on your Instagram story and then it spilled? And he was like, that's so sad that you lost the creamer. I'm like, dude, we have bigger problems here. Like my $3,000 laptop and all of my podcasts associated with it. Like, yes, I was sad, but it's this cookies and cream. Oh, it's so good.
See, it's unfair though, because I do think that at some level, if you start enjoying coffee too much, it becomes the drug that it is. And that's so like I almost want to not like it. Yeah. Like no one chased coffee the first time and goes, oh my God, I've been missing this my whole life. Just like their first beer. Everyone chasing like, well, I got to like this shit or else no one's going to, no one wants to hang out with me. I have no way to get a quick meeting or anything like that.
That's so funny. Take us back to when you were working at Ascent, right? Is that what it's called? Ascent, yeah. Which is in the special education space. And tell us.
They were acquired a few years ago by, they're a bit like, Frontline Education. They're a huge education conglomerate. I think they got bought a few years
so
ago.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think you actually, it's kind of a cool story even on a personal level, because you had like a little bit of friction as like who you were and how you look. And that could be a kind of cool tie-in to explain to us what you did there, how you found that role, and then kind of like what you experienced and moving from more of like a true developer role into a really sales position at the end of the day.
Sure, yeah. So, I think the context that I'll give is that in my family, so I'm one of three, and I always say if there's three sides to a spectrum, we're on it, because my brother is like this unbelievably intelligent, like kind of like taught himself to speak Spanish by reading a book kind of a thing. And my sister's unbelievably artistic, so like she can pick up a clarinet and play a song on the radio. And I was always trying to find what my thing was, and it was obviously based like sports and athleticism, but like in my head that wasn't, it's like not the same.
It wasn't enough because it wasn't like intellectual.
And it was
enough.
because something that my brother was.
But baseball takes a lot of smarts.
Especially I was a catcher, so like I had the whole game in front of me. I was kind of commanding the pitcher, so I did try to find the most like cerebral position, I guess. But I think my brother, and he always said it best. He's like, I would have hated you in high school, and I think that that's a fair representation of kind of what you were getting at, which is. I would have been, I look a certain way, I perform a certain way on the field, and therefore I couldn't be good academically.
Sure.
So I think I definitely saw some friction in the development community because I don't look like them, or I don't act like, I don't do the things that they do for fun, and I do feel like I felt some resistance there, and you bring it up in an interesting way, because I had mentioned to you that I was kind of going through an identity crisis.
Yeah.
I just finished college, where it was like, I was the captain of the baseball team, I was a starter. I was getting straight A's. I mean, I kind of had life kind of figured out. It felt like when you're in college and you're like, that's it. I was Stifler, really. It was fifth year, right? Like, of course you figured it out by now. And then it just stopped. And I remember this feeling of being like, okay, like now the world's my oyster, right? Because now I can go out into the world and do whatever. And within 2 months, I was a Walgreens assistant manager part-time at a bar in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina. And I'm like, what happened? I missed something there. At some point, I was just super cool and had all the things going, and then it was just like, oh, nothing.
It didn't materialize.
There was just nothing from it. And I think that's like a really important lesson to learn. I think I also had a different take on it because I was so far away from my family at the time.
Sure.
I was 800 miles away from my closest family member.
Okay.
So I was doing this all on my own. And I think that struggle, and you bring up friction, like to kind of reference it, it's like, I feel like people are really adverse to friction. Like it's like, ooh, friction, no. And sometimes you got to wade through the swamps to get to the clearer waters.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there is this natural adherence to stay away from it. This natural thing to say like, oh, 2020 sucked. And it's like, did it or did you grow? And are you upset about it because you're sitting there and you can only reflect in 2021 and say I grew.
Right.
But when you're going through it,
it doesn't
feel good. You're just trying to get rid of that feeling. And it's like, we all know growing pains. These exist outside of just our spirit. So it's like, so I think that when I first graduated, I was going through a lot of like trying to figure out who I was going to be now.
Okay.
Under the context of the world, right? Like I was in the context of school. Okay.
Yeah. And that was your world, and now your world changed.
So who am I going to be now? And I was working at a bar that was like a pizza bar, but it was like a craft pizza, and then became craft beer. Now this was like the beginning of craft beer.
Okay, so it was before it was a thing, like for any of the Charlotte people who like know Sycamore and all that jazz.
Right, this was before they even had it in restaurants. Like,
oh wow,
you would still go to Chili's and just get Budweiser, Miller, and them. Like there was no craft anything. And this
that's like a good time reference because that's like exploded in the last 6-7 years.
I had a conversation the other day talking about how they used to ask you smoking, non-smoking when I would walk into a restaurant, and like that's not even, you can't even fathom that anymore. We joke about that.
I remember when it was a huge deal in New York when they got rid of smoking at the bar. It was like I was in, I don't know, maybe high school or middle school, but I lived 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
And people like freaked out about it. They were like, "How could you do that in New York City? Like you have to be able to smoke inside."
Yeah.
Now that sounds
and
so
I was
weird.
living in New York when it started to go down south, and people would be like, oh, leave that stuff up for the northern, right? Like, we don't want that down here. We want to smoke. And I'm like, and then I moved down south, and people were smoking in bars, and I'm like, wait a second. I feel like I'm regressing.
Yeah.
So
that's funny.
But anyway, so I'm in this bar, and he's decided that he's going to expand to 24 different taps.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was learning, right? I wasn't really into beer at the time, but I was growing a taste for it because we had to test so many. And this was so early that you weren't buying in bulk yet. Like the obvious craft beers to buy, like you need Budweiser. You don't know what craft beers you need yet because you have different populations of people who only like certain things.
Preferences, yeah.
So he would just always had like a variety. And so he would print out these menus to put on the table so that people could come and ask for them, because obviously you have to prompt like I always say users, prompt the customer to be like, hey, what should you order? Because you've never ordered craft beer. And he would, once this keg gets kicked, it's not like he could go to their menus and change it. And I know nowadays, like people are like, oh, well, why didn't they just send? Well, yeah, but this was before you went online for everything. Right. I think that's important.
Okay.
Like, it wasn't like I'm going to go there and look at their menu online.
Yeah.
It was like I'm going to go to the restaurant and know if they're open online, but then go see what they have.
Okay.
So when he was explaining this to me, I'm like, so wait, you already know the beers that you have. It's just that they change. So he goes, yeah, it was like, I'm not here when the bartender the keg gets kicked and then blah, blah, blah. So I was like, I think I could solve this. Like, I think this is something that I literally know how to solve, because basically he needs records, like a database of all the different beers that he can have. And he has a layout for the menu that's very basic, which I can import into a template. And then all you need to do is just click the beers that you want and then click print. And it would just take those beers and put them on. Now, again, I didn't actually know how to code this. It was just in my head like, yeah, this makes sense. And I said it to him and he goes, you could do that? And this is where you have those moments. And this is where I think entrepreneurs get made. Somebody turns to you and says, you can do that? And you see it in their eye that they would pay for it. And you're like, yes. And you don't know if you could do it.
That's
right?
That's literally how I became a nutrition coach. Like, I wasn't even certified. I just had my own personal transformation. And then somebody was like, well, like, I was working at Burn Boot Camp at the time. We offered 15-minute focus meetings. That's not enough time to have an in-depth conversation about your diet. And then someone was like, you think you could we do this outside of here? And I was like, I guess. They were like, you look so good. You lost all this weight. I'm like, yeah. And they were like, could you help me? And I was like, sure.
Yes.
And that was it.
And that's it. Because ultimately, and you can imagine that everybody would respond like you did, but they wouldn't.
Right.
There's actually a ton of people who would say, oh, I don't like, no.
Which is so weird to me, because I don't think that way.
Because you would never, because it was always, my dad used to call me the kid on the white picket fence. He's like, as long as you don't tell him that he can fall, he could stay on top of that fence all day. But the second you're like, hey, you're doing something dangerous, it's like, well, just don't tell me about it.
That's funny.
But so when he had told me about this problem, and I went back, basically I learned VB, so I learned a programming language in about a month. It was December of that year, whatever year that was, probably 2012 maybe.
Okay.
And I built this app that and it wasn't online, right? It was like a local to the computer, but they could enter in the beers, and then the bartender would be able to go over and click which beers were out and which beers were on, and then click print. And then he'd be able to go to the back, it would print the right amount of menus in the right style, and he'd pass them out. And I remember the day that it was ready, because I showed up to the bar, 2 hours before work started in a full suit. It was 95 degrees in Columbia, South Carolina. I mean, but I had to look professional. This is what people do, that they sell things, right? They look a certain way. And like now, all those contracts are gone. Like the contracts of any of that, right? Like if an artist came in a suit to sell you artwork, you'd actually look down on them, because you're like, why don't you look like you just painted something, right? Like cognitively, you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. So I tried to dress the part, and I sold it for $150. $150 for something that took me, I guess, about a month to make.
Okay.
He ended up using the application for 4 years.
And it was a one-time fee.
It was a one-time fee, right? And I was so excited that I did that. And I remember, because right after that, I had to work an overnight shift at Walgreens. And every 7 to 8 weeks, we'd have to work an overnight. And that was 10 or 8 days in a row, 10-hour shifts.
Oh, whoa.
Because what they do is they buddy up 2 weeks together. So they give you off on either end, and then they put 8 days of work straight. And you work from 10 p.m. to, I guess, 6 or 8 the next morning, whatever it is. And it was at the end of one of those shifts where I'm like, this is not I knew I wasn't going to end up at Walgreens, but I think it's a good experience to get with customers, manage people. Like I don't look down on any of those types of careers, but I knew that wasn't what I ultimately wanted to do. And after working my last overnight shift, I was like, this is actually taking away from me. Like I can't function. I just lost 2 weeks, and that just felt like so much to lose for something that I wasn't crazy about. Right. And I quit that day. So the last day they came to me and they're like, hey, we're going to be restructuring a little bit. And the manager kind of knew me. And she was looking at me like, I know you're about to quit, but I need to tell you this. And she was like, we're going to restructure your job to do this, this, and that. I'm like, wait a second, I'm sorry. So you're going to pay me less, give me more responsibility and no upside.
I'm out.
I'm going to go. Like, thank you. And she goes, I know, but good luck with everything, right? Like, she was totally cool about it. And now I'm like, now I need to find this job. The reason I tell that part of the story is because I think this is where a lot of people also don't see the gaps that we do as entrepreneurs when we're not ready to start a company. At that point, I had solved the guy's problem and gotten paid for something that I did full end. Why not start a company? Because at least at that point, to me, that wasn't what it was to start a company. I had made a sale and that felt really cool. Now I want to understand the structure of software sales. So now I was like, I need to go find a dev job. I would love to keep coding because this is cool. But I knew I didn't have an applied experience because I didn't have a college education in it, right? I had a management and marketing degree, which obviously when you pair up with a baseball player, you're like, you didn't care about school. So again, like people see my resume and it's not that impressive. They weren't like drawn to it. But then I ended up lucking out getting an interview with a tech company that didn't hire me, but gave me a 2-hour interview. And literally the whole interview was me talking about what I had done for the bar and then doing it for them. So they took me through the paces of like, okay, you're going to do live coding. And immediately I was like, oh, I'm screwed because I'm not a developer at this point. And he was like, okay, we're going to build software for you to help you find a job. So you are going to gather the requirements from us, and then you're going to write pseudocode about how you would do it and then how it would be presented to them. I nailed the part of the requirement gathering because it's literally what I had just done for the bar. Yeah. And that's when I think they identified what my strength was, which was taking something from a need and turning it into a product.
Sure.
So they didn't offer me a job at that point. They actually ended up offering me a job before I took the one I did with the special education company, but they linked me with the special education company.
Okay.
So that's what got me out of the bar scene, out of the Walgreens, and then into like special education software.
Very cool.
So that was a cool job. I started somewhat developing, but a lot of it was client interactions.
Sure.
And I learned a lot. I learned about long sales cycles because these are school districts. So you're talking about 9 to 12 month sales cycles.
Right.
I learned
and
about requests.
Are they keeping the product for like a couple of years?
Oh, and the retention rate was 100% because like if a school district made the choice to move to your software, it was the most painful process in the world, and they would never want to do it again.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So I learned a lot there. I learned a lot about client gathering, but I think what I really learned there was understanding that the decision maker for the use of the software is not always the person using it. And the bigger the gap between those people, the harder the sale. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, the salespeople want the salespeople that are going to make decisions.
Right.
And they don't want to talk to the person using the software.
In your case, it could have been like the principal was making the decision or like the head of the board of education. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But
Superintendents
the teachers were using the software.
And also let's just look at like the demographically speaking.
Yeah.
All of the superintendents we talked to were older white men.
Right.
And all of the women that we spoke with were 60, 50 plus special education directors who wanted to use pencil and paper if it was up to them. They didn't want to use the computer. They were fine with the way things were.
Right.
But this was compliance software. So this is what got them their government funding based on the education programs they laid out. So it kind of held them to it, right?
Yeah,
so like
they had no choice.
So you have an unbelievably resistant user base with a person who's almost impossible to get on the phone. When you tackle sales like that, you feel like you could do anything.
Sure.
And I feel like so that gave me a lot of confidence because I was the youngest person in that organization to have a leadership role by 15 years.
Yeah.
So I would walk into a room of special educators with a half arm sleeve of tattoos, a shaved head, and the build of an ex-college baseball player telling them about how they're going to educate their students. And they looked at me like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I had to learn how to command a room who didn't respect me off the gate. And it builds character. It's that uncomfortable friction. I'm like, this is super uncomfortable, but I know I must be growing. I don't know if I was aware of it at the time, but it's so easy to look back on it now and be like, wow, this really prepared me.
That's really cool. And so then do you think that like, okay, so you had all those experiences, right? And did you have any interest in, I mean, look, like selling compliance software is probably not the most sexy thing.
Right.
So where did the rubber hit the road for you in terms of making a decision to move in more of a fitness direction?
Sure.
Because you made it very clear to us that, you know, sports, that was your niche, that was your thing. And while you certainly learned a ton, like just aesthetically, like, and due to your interests, like, of course you wound up in more of like a media type with like a sports focus. So was that the jump to grid? Like, where did that come from?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
And I also think that it's because it was the first thing that presented an opportunity to work under the context that I wanted to, which was small startup company.
Okay. So it wasn't even so much about the fitness. It was it was the environment of being a startup?
It was definitely the startup environment. Okay. And I think a huge component was the fact that I felt like I wasn't completely a fishy out of water. So like when you sat me in front of a special educator, even though I knew that they would benefit from the use of the software, I didn't know the level of depth that they could, right? Like if I understood even then what I understood now about individual education and like the processes that they go to create these gifted and talented programs and all, like what a better person I would have been for the job, right? Like ultimately having that notion, having that understanding of why they're doing what they're doing and why these headaches are headaches helps you create better software. So I think when I found myself in the grid realm, which was right after I had started CrossFit and was like, I'm never going to be good at this. This requires way too much aerobic capacity. So grid came out, was way more team oriented, which is my background. I love team sports.
Right.
And it was do what you can that you're good at and get out. And I'm like, yeah, this is something I could like. So I wanted to play.
Okay.
And that's what got me started in that realm. Then I ended up building a feeder league, this is the jump that my dad always makes fun of. He's like, most people would just go try to play. He's like, and instead you created a league for other teams to put together, right? Like I just took the biggest chunk I could. And 6 months later, I had a job with them. Very cool. That was like a cool transition to be
That's
like,
awesome.
Oh, I got recognized. I did something on my own, got recognized, and now I got brought into the fold.
So it was literally just like tell us a little. I know about grid, but like tell us a little bit more about like you just wanted to participate with some of your friends. When did you realize like, oh, I should help like them make a funnel league? It was almost you made like a click funnel for that.
So what I did was I used what I knew about baseball.
Okay.
And I mean, people love the story about how we started, and like the very brief version is that we had no money. There was no money in this. This was a side gig. We never looked at this as like, this is going to take over our main.
Okay.
We just wanted to create this league together.
Okay.
And me and my partner sat down. We were kind of like going through the different ways to get people interested. And they said that the problem you're going to face is that the good people, and you know what it's like when you're good in athletics, it's hard. Like your egos are so rampant in the fitness industry.
Oh yeah.
And not just with the people that are performing.
No.
Even with the people that are
participating,
coaching, whatever it is. So we're like, okay, so how do we get people in? The thing that we had different than what Grid had going for it is that don't mean this to be offensive, but we weren't CrossFitters.
Sure.
He was an ex-football player and I was an ex-baseball player. So we knew sports. And then we saw this opportunity where it's like, why aren't we treating these people more like athletes? Like everyone, it was all about money at the time. So CrossFit competitions were running rampant, but it was all about how much money can you make.
Sure.
And we're like, there's more to sports than how much money. Like I played sports for 20 years without making a dime. So I know that there's more to it. And I was like, okay, let's brainstorm what got us excited. Getting your name on the back of a jersey.
Of course.
That gets you pumped. I remember my first one, 8th grade, and I got it, and it was like because I was part of this all-star team, and I got to wear it for 1 weekend. I felt like, oh my God, the man, because they put final letters on the top of my. So that's what we did. I would focus on trying to create them feeling like athletes that should be looked up to, not just giving them money.
Okay.
Because the truth is, money goes away, and admiration tends to last.
Right.
So if I can give people that admire you to you, I become way more valuable to you than someone that could just give you money. Because what are you going to do with that?
Right.
So we went to CrossFit competitions and with a pen and paper as if we were recruiting them like we got recruited to go play in other. So he played professionally and I played in college.
Okay.
So we showed up with clipboards and stopwatches.
Like you were scouts.
Yeah, we were scouting. And we sat in the bleachers. And I mean, we were playing a little psych game. But like we'd sit in the bleachers together with the name of our company on the back and the website on the front. And we would write down notes about people. And they were kind of real, but not really. We were just kind of writing so that people would see us writing and like, who the hell are these guys? Because we both looked like the role.
Sure.
Like we should have been participating, but we weren't, which was like kind of like, juxtaposition there. And then we would go up to people after the end of competitions and be like, hey, you performed really well. We wanted to talk to you and not talk to anybody else. We would just talk to the person that won and then walk away. By the end of the first weekend of competitions that we went to, there was a line wrapped around the bleachers of people trying to talk to us. And they didn't even know what we were doing. They were just intrigued because we were only talking to the best of the best. So there's a lot of psychological hacks that you can have. And they're not hacks, right? They're just social.
You're playing into people's what makes us
centers
tick.
Is what we're playing into, right? So it's like, it didn't cost us any money. It cost us time. We went there. We had time. We didn't have money. So let's figure this out. And I ended up getting over 1,000 people to sign up.
No way.
Yeah, for our online stuff, which was more than the professional league had done.
Okay.
And then we held a competition where pro athletes that actually got to play professional also came down and played in the amateur one.
Wow.
For no money.
Yeah.
The prize, there was no money. Everybody got their shirts with names on the back. Every team. They paid us to play when they were complaining that the professionals weren't paying them to play, right? It's like, but they were willing to pay
Yeah.
because we created the more
Wow.
fun space to be.
Right.
And I remember the conversations that I had because obviously the ego was there, and I would get this call from one of the pros, and I'll never forget it. I'm not gonna put him
Say
or
who
her
it
on
was.
blast.
Yeah.
But they called and they were like, "Listen, man, like I'm so much better than these people," and I know you're immediately thinking it's a guy, but
Okay.
it wasn't. They were like,
I actually have a feeling who it is.
So they were like-
I'm going to ask you after we're done recording because I have an idea.
So they were like, "Listen, like I'm already so much better than these people. Like I don't want to play down." And I'm like, "Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of Ting Tong?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "So it's this crazy sport in Asia." I was like, "And they're obsessed with it over there. And there's this girl Misha who crushes everybody she meets."
Okay.
And she's like, "Okay, so what's the point?" And I'm like, "That's you in grid right now. No one knows how good you are because no one even knows what the sport is. The only way that people will understand how much better you are is to go play right next to them, because then they'll appreciate you for the skill." Because everybody said, "Oh my, Monday morning quarterbacking."
Yeah.
We all said to them, "Man, if you would have just faded right." Oh yeah, you do it with the 600-pound guy running at right. Like
Right.
we can't put ourselves in that context. I'm like, if you have a bunch of people who got to see you live and beat them right next to them, they're going to watch you forever.
Of course.
That's how you build the fame of a sport. And I knew psychologically, I'm like, I'm building what's going to become the elite of this sport.
Sure.
And right now, the elite was picking off the top of CrossFit. So I'm
Right.
like, if I created a league out of this, they would have to come somewhere to get these athletes, and I'll be the only place.
Right.
So after
Okay.
the first season,
So cool.
we had 12 people graduate to go on and play in the pros, including me.
Oh,
Like I
okay.
didn't play,
Yeah,
but I got
yeah.
to go work with them.
Cool. That's awesome.
So that was my injection into it.
Nice. Who's your favorite CrossFit athlete?
Ooh.
Maybe like to watch, male and female.
I mean, I got to like. I hate to be the front row. I love Rich Froning.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
he's
we have a
awesome.
lot in common. Like I think he was a baseball player.
Mm-hmm.
He has that. He is such a baseball player. By the way, I don't care when he stopped playing. Like he reminds me of everybody I played baseball with.
That's so funny.
So plus he has he's definitely the best, if not
Yeah.
one of the best. Right.
Yeah.
I think Matt Frazier would beat him right now, but
Sure.
like ultimately what he had that the other ones didn't was he was a competitor.
Right.
And when you watch, I mean, even guys like Jason Khalipa, like he was a little messy, but you watch guys like Dan Bailey, who was an athlete before, but Rich had this extra gear.
Okay.
And that was always what I enjoyed watching
Very
about
cool.
it. I came up when him and Camille were the best.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so having like kind of that duo was like a very good intro to CrossFit.
For sure. That's awesome. That's so cool.
I was entrenched in it.
Yeah, very
I
cool.
drank the Kool-Aid
Yeah.
for at least a year.
So what do you think now about like, all of the like scandals that have come through it? Every sport has it.
I mean, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, and you can even drop sport. Every company has it. Right?
Sure.
Like at some point, it's a
Sure.
brand, right? So there's going to be mishaps, and I'm a big John Mayer fan.
Okay.
Right.
Love John
and
Mayer.
it wasn't cool to like John Mayer when I was growing up. It just wasn't, right? He sang songs like Your Body's a Wonderland and being like, a 17-year-old guy.
right,
It wasn't like,
right.
but I liked him. And then he started becoming like a little bit of a womanizer in the news, and he was always with the hottest girls, and they're like, "Oh, I don't like John." And I'm like, listen, I don't judge my musician likes and dislikes based off of who they are as people.
Right.
Unless they do something egregious, right?
Yeah, like you
if
didn't
you're
kill
just getting-
someone.
If you're going to cheat on something, like, yeah, you suck, but like your
Right.
songs are still dope.
Sure.
Justin Bieber's done a bunch of messed up shit. His beats
Right.
still bang. Sorry. It's very seldom that I put on a Justin Bieber song and I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah, like,
Right?
his new song "Holy," it's real
Yeah,
good. It's
I mean,
real
he put out
good.
Christmas songs. You're
Yeah.
like, you know what?
I
listen
like
to
it.
this,
Yeah.
right? Like, some people just have it.
Let me ask you this question. One of my friends was saying to me recently, especially with what's happened in 2020 and us going virtual, there's more people who want to be entrepreneurs, but we don't live in a society where everyone can be their own boss. Like the world won't work. Like
Right.
we need to have this environment where people work for other people, and like not everyone can and not everyone should. So what is your take on that? Like what do you think about like maybe some of the top like 2-3 characteristics of an entrepreneur? And you've already touched on this in
Sure.
saying like how people find entrepreneurship, but what do you think about that statement of like not everyone can be an entrepreneur, but a lot of people try and maybe they shouldn't?
Yeah, so I'll answer it in two parts. So I'll leave the things that I find in good entrepreneurs, or
As
at least
one.
what I've
Yeah.
identified as one. I'll start with the idea that I think that people look at a lot of things, and I have been delving into this a lot with fitness. So we've talked about this with studio, where it's like people want to look at a path in life as if it's linear, and it's just so not, and not even like it's close. It's just not even close to linear. It's
Yeah.
very like back and forth. I mean, if you look at like the entropy of how you go in and even out of your fitness in your life, why would we think that wouldn't also appear in love and jobs and everything else, right? Like, of course, there's times when I feel like I don't want to work out, and then I stop for 3 months, just like the person who only worked out for 3 months ever and stops, right? Like, we're not different in that moment. So I do think that you got to test it. Like, my brother told me when I was young, he's like, you don't date to find out what you like, you date to find out what you don't like. And it's a very interesting way of looking at it, a little bit pessimistic, but it's an interesting way of looking at it, because statistically speaking, you're not going to be with but 10% of the people that you're ever with in your entire life.
True.
More than likely, you're not going to be with the person you're with. Ooh, doesn't that feel so uncomfortable, right? But why can't we look at the same thing in the workspace? If you think that you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, go for it. Here's the people I can't stand. This is you want some dirt? I've never said this on the podcast before.
I do want some dirt.
I really do feel about this. I think that the most dangerous people in the world are people who assess that they can offer more or do more than what they're putting out. Like, I'm smarter than I am, or I'm fitter than I am. I think if you're super fit and you know it, that's awesome. I don't think you're arrogant. I think that you're understanding, right? Like, it's when you're not that good and you think you're the shit that I think you're dangerous. Yeah. Because then you start playing in realms of like psychologically burdening other people with your shit. Mm-hmm. And I think that stops them. So you take the entrepreneur who shouldn't be an entrepreneur, but you want to try it, go for it. Just don't turn to me after your first 3 months because you only got 800 followers and think that, oh, this isn't going to be a business. And it's like, now you've just lost my respect, because if that's what you're looking at as your metric, if your metric is I need it to be popular to have a business, that's not what business is. We say entrepreneur nowadays. You know what it replaced? Businessman.
Yeah,
that's good, right? Because businesswoman doesn't have the same entrepreneur sounds better for everyone. So cool, we all win. But that's what it was. It's someone like an entrepreneur is not someone with an idea. You have to be more than that.
Because you need to execute. I feel like Gary Vee has probably said a lot of stuff about that. I mean,
he burns that quote better than anybody I know.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Because you can't just be this idea man.
Well, I always joke with people, I'm like, everyone thinks that when they start their own company, that the first thing you do is you'll hire for the things that you can't do well. Newsflash, you hire for the things you can do well because it's the only thing you know well enough to be able to hire people on. So you have these little things that trip people up early on. Sure. There are things that I've heard over my... So I'm a... type 5 Enneagram. I don't know if you're into the Enneagram.
1.
So I'm a 1. 5 wing 4.
Yeah. Okay.
Which
What's a 4? What are your characteristics?
So the interesting part is if you look at it, it's a circle, right? Yeah. But technically 5 and 4 don't really touch. There's only a very small portion of overlap. So it's one of the most rare combinations.
Yeah. I don't even know what the 4s are.
It's because it combines the thing that like about how you feel with about what's actually going on mentally. Okay. So that's why I feel like I can deliver empathy at such a high level because I feel the emotions. I do. They're there in me. I can, muster them up. I can feel them for you even if I didn't experience it. Yeah. And at the same time, I have this unbelievably, and I don't want to call it logical. I want to call it like critical thinking part where I'm just like, ooh, this feels like there's an obvious path out or a path in. So with that said, I feel like that's actually one of the biggest parts of being an entrepreneur is empathy. If I see empathy in you, and it doesn't mean I think that I say empathy, I say self-awareness, and I say resiliency, and those traits get so overused that I feel like people have this misnomer about what that means to be self-awareness is not saying that you're self-aware. In fact, it's a lot like coolness. Yeah. You know who doesn't say they're cool? Cool people, because they don't have to say it, right? Like if you come up to me like, oh yeah, I'm very self-aware. Yeah. I'm an extremely self-aware person. I'm like, because a self-aware person would know how uncomfortable it is to talk about your own self-awareness to somebody else, right? Exactly. So it's like, well, so I think that self-awareness, as all things, spans a spectrum, and I think there's stages to it, just like grief. Yeah. So if you're going to tell me that self-awareness is just the cognizant recognition of who you are, that's just a portion. That's the beginning. Sure. Right? That's like an alcoholic identifying that they have a problem. Like that, you're right. That needs to come first, and you're on your way. But to say that you're self-aware, first of all, anyone that says like they're done, I already like... Yeah. If you're done, you can't be that's the other thing. You want to talk about the biggest trait that people miss over when they talk about the conversations like curiosity. If you're not a curious individual, I think that you're going to have a lot of tough time in business, specifically because it's not just about the product or service that you're offering where you need to be creative. Sure. It's not just about the marketing advertising that like you need to be creative. You can be creative in the way that you sell. You can be creative in the pricing structure. You can be creative in the organic growth model. You can be creative in the networking that you use to satisfy. Like, there's so many different, and that all comes from curiosity. Yeah, right?
Totally.
Like, the most creative people I've ever met are the most curious people I've ever met.
People ask me why I ask a lot of questions, and like it actually it's been a challenge on my podcast, even though I am supposed to be asking the questions. But like even a friend of mine said to me last night, he's like, you have to become a better listener.
Here's a metaphor that I like. So I say that, let's say that you're trying to create like this beautiful picture, right? and you need to cut it out. If you cut right on the line that the picture's supposed to be, if you mess up at all, you ruin the picture.
Yeah.
But if you cut a nice circle around the whole thing and then start honing it or start like taking clay,
Sure.
you don't take the exact amount of clay you need. You take way more and you start
Chipping
carving
away.
it away. And I feel like that's what curiosity does. Curiosity takes a guy like me over the past 6 months of exploring what studio could be.
Sure.
And watch the people on the other side that are listening to this cringe at the thought of me spending 6 months actually just exploring what studio could be.
They would tell you you're wasting your time.
What are you doing? You could have had more users. You could have monetized them already. And oh my God, every inexperienced person has called me and told me, why haven't I monetized it yet? And I'm just like, because I'm not trying to do what you think I should do, or even what I don't know yet. I'm still exploring what I can do and what I think I'm capable of. And then I come back. Right, so everyone loves to tell me that I'm all over the place. So I think you get this a lot, which is where I feel
all
it
the time.
And I think that one thing that you'll notice over time is that you'll start to talk less because your notion of where you want people to go will become more obvious as you do more interviews.
Yeah.
So the more people I talk to, I now don't have to talk as much because I lead them with the perfect questions.
Yep.
So I know that they're going to stay in path. But now I sit back here and I'm like, yeah, I spent 6 months researching. And that research wasn't surveys. It wasn't like I was talking to them. I would go visit trainers. I would sit with them. And then I would go talk to consumers. And everybody's a consumer at this point. I've never had that before. That's so exciting. So I used to only be able to talk to like, well, special educators that are, and it's like, oh, only people that need websites or CRM. And now it's everybody. So what an exciting venture for me to like go sit outside somewhere and have a coffee in the afternoon. And there's a girl sitting there reading a book and she's got workout clothes on.
Right.
And I'm just like, hey, did you just work out?
Yeah.
And I've noticed I'm not hitting on her. And she may think I am. I don't care. My goal is to figure out what got her working out today.
Right.
What started her. And now you get to start culminating this knowledge. And I sit back and I'm like, you're right. I would have had an extra 5,000 users if I had just done this. And if I would have just gotten this feature out and I could have charged for it. And then I would have a group of people who are happy enough. That doesn't excite me.
Yeah.
That doesn't get me going.
Right.
I need people that love it. I'm trying to create a cult
so
behind
true.
this thing. And I also think that there's this concept too, and when you talk about like when I say resiliency, what I mean by resiliency in someone is not just the idea that you can get knocked down and get back up. We all know that definition. There's a resiliency in dealing with everybody telling you how stupid you are every single day. I am 33 years old. I just turned 33.
Happy belated birthday.
I appreciate it. And never in my life have I been told by so many people that I'm on the wrong path. And I understand that there is a point in time where you have to decide what's right for you, right? Like, and that's where that self-awareness comes in. But you have to constantly deal. And then I always get reminded of that Jeff Bezos quote. That's like, everybody will think you're crazy when you're about to innovate because it's crazy to try to change people in the way that they are. And in no way am I comparing myself to Jeff Bezos.
No.
It's just to take learnings from people who have done it in a way that wasn't because they read a book about doing it. It's what they naturally discovered. All the entrepreneurs now are a little tainted because they have the Gary Vee in the back of their head. They have the whoever they look up to in the business culture. There's so many infopreneurs out there that just sell you what you think you should know.
Yeah.
And that's their whole game. Their game is to find out what you think you should know and take it from there.
Yeah.
So I think that when I'm like looking at Studio to kind of talk into it, it's like it started as the solve to a problem, which is why there's over 5,000 users without any marketing, because it's just like these people had a problem and then I solved it. So yeah, you're going to get users. And now where I get to go is like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Right now,
Like, how do you even want to market it?
Because maybe I just want to do exactly what they want. And I want to get back to what I was working on before that, right? Like these are all options and opportunities. And I definitely like go into the nth to like the deep ends of things to try to figure out if there's some options. But I think what I come back with is a very holistic view of the community.
Sure.
And now I'm like, ooh, I see the opportunity. And so I'll just give it away because it doesn't really matter.
Because even like what you, like where you're going with this, like when we talked on the phone last week or 2 weeks ago and you told me about your idea, I was like, I was not thinking you were going to tell me that.
And how many weeks passed since we had talked? Like two or three? And and that's how much and meteoric these changes will be. And the difference is I got off the conversation with you and felt energized because you saw it, because you gave it the opportunity. I had earned the trust in you that you're like, I'm going to listen to you for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Like I earned that. You gave me that 10 minutes and you were like, oh, I see this. When the three people that I told before you in a much different way were like, why don't you just do that, right? Like, just get back to what you were doing. And I'm like, no, this is the fun part. This is the part that I get to see who's excited and who I want to be excited about this. Because that's the other thing we talked about, friction, to loop this whole thing back together, right? Like, sometimes creating friction even between customers is not a bad thing, right? Having some process gets them more bought in. And so, like, there's this concept of, when you talk about being creative, what do you charge for? Well, you could charge for features. You could charge for users. You could charge for the amount of money there's so many different ways to charge people. And I'm like, what if you didn't charge them for more features and you made them unlock them? So as you do better, I start promoting you within the system and giving you more opportunities to make money. So prove to me that you can make money.
Right.
Because guess what? I know people making money with just Instagram posts.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that you need this. No, there's people right now doing fitness posts that are less than 60 seconds, show 5 different movements, and they have hundreds of thousands of views.
Exactly.
Right? So you can do that right now. It's literally just what level of abstraction you're looking to go to. Because if you go too high, you become obsolete.
Sure.
Right? You become one of thousands and tens of thousands where there's no network.
Right.
And if you go too shallow, there's no real business to be created. So you have to find that. And I think that that's what you're doing now. You're like, I'm just going to see who's reacting to this stuff and stay. And that's really what it's like. Like they say sales is kind of like shifting in Formula One. You have to know exactly where you're going, but be able to switch at any time.
Yeah.
And I think you're actually very good at that,
Thank
which
you.
is why I think you're so good with the sales component of it, because it's like, you get people excited, and then they want to do something, and then you tell them what to do. And that's the harder part in business. If you can do the first part, it's no different than me trying to break down why people do things. I'm obsessed with human behavior because I'm a marketer. And so while you focus on what Facebook ad converts the best, I'm going to focus on why people go on Facebook.
Right, exactly.
Because that's way more interesting.
Way higher
At
level.
what level?
Yeah.
Because it's very good to know the tactics. Don't get me wrong. It's good to understand how to utilize the different pieces of software. But at some level, if I can understand what makes you do something, it doesn't matter what that thing is.
Yeah.
So if I spend the next 15, 20 years just figuring out how you do something, I can monetize it forever.
Right.
It just never ends. I can sell Krysta
and I think
anything.
That's like literally like how you do something. That's studio, because the thing that you pitched to me as like you asked me, you didn't even ask me like what are your pain points. I don't remember the exact questions that were asked, but it was just like,
because it's normally very conversational.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
very not like put you on the spot.
Right. And it like made me realize that I use too many pieces of too many tools and software. Like I have Keep, I have Hootsuite, I have Later, I have Instagram, I have Facebook, I have my podcast, I have a coach for that, I have a business coach, I have a life coach. It's like I have Canva. And I just said to you, I was like, I just need all this in one place, because like I'm ahead of the game in that I did go to school for graphic design. I know how to use Adobe Creative Suite. Yeah. Like, and I'm not great at it. I'm not like a graphic designer.
I know the same 12 things I knew when I started.
All right, and I'm good enough at it. But then there's people who are like, let's talk about this. What you said to me when we first got started in discussing studio is so many trainers left gyms and they had the hype and the glory in that box gym or in that studio, and that gym closed, and they tried to go online and they're like, oh, this is going to be so easy. Like I had this huge following and like, it's great. And I'm just going to post a bunch of posts on Instagram and I'm going to get 20 clients. A month in, how many clients do they have? 0.
Right. Yeah.
Why? Because they don't know how to run a business. They just know how to be a trainer.
Because there's, and yeah, well, that hits on like one of the principles of studio. That was a really good alley-oop there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that that's what the problem I'm trying to solve is. And I think that right now, if you want to call them my competitors, we can call them that.
Sure.
The other apps out there, the thousands of apps that are out there that are coming out every single day, because I know, because people message them to me every single day, are, in my opinion, all solving a very similar problem, which is the distribution of digital fitness media. Right. So getting back to it, because you said something earlier that stuck in my head when you were talking about the girl who was like, oh, I'm just going to go online because I already have a following. Yep. And so I was dating a girl earlier this year who was doing the same thing. And she was like, oh, this person's got like 110,000 followers. She probably crushes it. And I was like, do one of her classes. Like, so it was $5. Do it. Like, I'll give you $5. You want to go do like, what? And this is the other part of the entrepreneurialism where it's like you look for those things like that wouldn't have even been a question in my head. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not going to sit behind and be like, oh, I wonder what that's like. It cost me $20 to try it. I'm going to try it. Yeah. So she does it, and 9 people come in. Hundreds of thousands of followers, and 9 people showed up. And
people
she was averaging 12.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so look at the difference here. she gets all the claim and everybody walks around saying, look at her, look at her, look at her. But you probably made more money off of your people than she.
Easily.
I'm not saying for branded posts and sponsors and all that.
Right.
Sure,
she has other
more
revenue
opportunity,
streams.
Don't get me wrong. But when it comes to specifically training people for money, you're winning. And this is the problem I'm trying to solve with Studio. There's two significant problems with trainers. So for now, just to kind of keep the audience intact here, consumers and producers are the people I refer to in my app. The consumers are the people doing the fitness, the producers are the people creating it. So the trainers, coaches, gyms, whatever, that falls into the producer category. And the problem that I'm trying to solve with them is twofold. So one is you guys have content more than 35-minute follow-along classes, right? Like I talk to you for 10 minutes and I'm like, she doesn't just have that. Like you have more value than that. So like if I made you get on my app and all you could do was upload 25-minute classes that you charged for, that would satisfy you for a little bit until the next app came out with that plus was one other thing. And you're like, well, I'm going to leave that because it has this one other thing. So I'm like, why can't everything you do be discoverable within the place that you go? Like, why can't I go to the FYX on Studio and see the fact that you have a podcast and see the fact that you have classes and see the fact that you offer nutrition coaching and see the fact that you also do some side business, seeing that you train trainers? Like, why isn't that all together somewhere?
Exactly.
And you could put it on your Instagram.
It's on my Instagram, but
and a link in
you
bio.
have to dig.
And you have to find it. And the other truth is that while we are maybe in a demographic that goes to Instagram for inspiration to work out, 4 years older than us doesn't.
No.
And 10 years younger than us doesn't.
Right.
So it's like...
Yeah, like I'm not going to go on... Like I actually polled my followers about TikTok. Because I asked people, I'm like, do you like the reels and the TikTok videos of me showing you different exercises? You want to know how many of my followers said no?
How many?
Almost all of them.
Yeah.
Because they're used to Instagram. They want to be able to swipe and hold down the amount of time they're watching the same video again and again. And reels and TikToks move too fast for them.
Oh, I can't wait to show you what I have inside.
But meanwhile, like somebody who is, 16 years old, she doesn't care. And she's on TikTok.
But also, like, once you identified your demographic, serve them what they want.
Right.
My point is to say that, and you just kind of walked into it, which is, if my goal with Studio is to make you more money, which is ultimately the goal.
Of course.
Fitness professionals can't make enough money, period. They're educated, they understand, but the truth is, if you're entertaining, you make money, and if you're not entertaining, you don't make money. If you have abs, you make more money. If you have a good butt, you make more money. I mean, we can't just ignore all of that to say that it's tough for fitness professionals to make money, because that will be the thing that they say back to me. What are you talking about? These trainers on Instagram make... No. Those are trainers on Instagram.
Right.
People who work out and recognize that because they have abs, people will pay them for their workouts thinking that they're going to find that result.
Yeah.
Which also leads to the bigger thing that the platform is trying to solve, which is this unbelievably tight bond between aesthetic and fitness, as if that is the ultimate. There's the only point you do it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and even the most prominent people talk about this.
Yeah.
Right? Like they come out and they say, listen, you may not want to work this hard, but if you look down and you don't like what you see, and it's like, oh, see, I'm with you, man, but why do you have to go there?
Yeah, like why do you have to say it that way?
You don't like how you feel. If body confidence is the point of all of this, then we should stop saying that there's a specific body that's the goal.
Right.
Because that's the whole point.
It has nothing to do with them having abs or whatever it is, but like at the end of the day, that still does sell.
It's all part of it.
Have to.
I'm not saying that the aesthetic should be
compromised.
Looked over.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we should recognize the fact that it probably makes up 25% of one of the three major goals of fitness.
Yeah,
right?
Of
Like
course.
it's a subset of a subset of a
Especially
goal.
when you look at your type of client. Because like for me, I have more and more clients now, and I take this as a credit to myself of doing a good job, that when I ask them what their goals are, they've stopped telling me they want to lose 10 pounds or whatever. They're like, I just want to feel better. I'm a mom and I have no energy.
Yeah.
That's like, okay.
And that's also a level of self-awareness.
Right.
And again, maybe this is just my opinion on this, so I'd love to hear your feedback on it. But I also don't think that they look at your hair and nails and makeup and think, she's so hot, that's why I want to be like her.
Not at
I
all.
think they say, wow, she's got it together.
Yep.
And that, to me, is the underlying thing that we look at when we see these models, because the truth is, we don't all want abs.
No.
I've had abs.
I don't even want them.
I know
I don't
what
have
they
them. I'm
feel
so
like,
far away.
and I know what it takes to maintain them.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, hey, guys, this is for all the guys listening out there. I got something big news for you. They don't care. I know you think they do, but they don't. You may get a look that you wouldn't have gotten, And how many times a year do you have your shirt off being looked at by people you don't know? And the point is, if you're out there in the fitness community trying to make a money, do it however you want, right? Like, I'm not saying don't post pictures of your abs and butt because you think my point is to say,
contextualize it.
When you get that person in your grasp, do not make it all about the look.
Yeah.
It cannot be the result, because it leads to what we have now, which is what I joked about the other day with the shower thing. I'm like, explain this to me. We're recommended to get 22 minutes of fitness in a day, 22 minutes of an elevated heart rate. That's it. 22 minutes of physical activity per day. And people are like, I can't make time for it. I can't get to the gym. I can't do all of these things. I can't. And I'm like, okay, if I told you not to shower for the next 6 months, what would you say? That's disgusting, right? I'm like, okay, imagine your insides are being cleaned by the fitness.
Yeah.
Because you go 6 months without it and your insides look like shit. You don't get to see it. Sometimes you see it. Sometimes you're like, ooh, I don't like the way this looks, or I don't like the way this feels, as I grope my body right now. No, I'm on a podcast, and only she can see this. I'm like, ooh, I don't like the way this feels. But at the end of the day, psychologically, physiologically, your sleep, your nutrition, all of these things start to get into a better rhythm if you just give fitness the same amount you give the shower and the toothbrushing you do every day, just because it would be gross if you didn't. It would be gross if you didn't work out for 6 months too. Ooh, that hurts. Doesn't it make you feel a little uncomfortable? It's because we get into fitness thinking that there's some goal. And that's the problem. I'm not saying that it's not going to work. Of course it is. Marketers find the best solutions in the world, right? The ones that make the most money are not the best solutions.
No.
They're the ones that are the easiest to market.
Yep.
If I can show you the story very quickly. So what's the story? You look like this, which you don't like. You want to look like this, which I do like. Buy my software, right? Like, buy my product. Of course. Yeah, that makes perfect sense why it would work. It's also lazy. So let's try something different. Let's try not ruining America by telling everybody that it's all about the aesthetic, whatever the aesthetic is.
Yeah.
Whether it's big or small, it doesn't actually matter, which is why I think it's so funny that. So I have a theory that by 2025 we're going to see the opposite of fat shaming. We're going to see slim shaming, which is you're so skinny, right? And you see it now, right? You see the culture because everybody that's skinny now has an eating disorder. You ever notice that?
Yeah,
everyone that's skinny has an eating disorder. No, there's actually just some people who are naturally skinny, like, and that's just how they look, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like once we can start untying some of these, which are rooted, in my opinion, very young. Right? We look at PE class as probably our introduction to physical activity, which is you're either already good because you're an athlete and that's who the gym coach likes the most, or you're penalized with fitness. Oh, you did something wrong, go run a mile.
Right, exactly.
You did something wrong, go do burpees. And you're like, ugh.
To that point, tell us about what you see for studio on like a grander scale of being this like ecosystem in place, like an iTunes store or like our more adult comparison to OnlyFans.
And I kind of look at studio like it's OnlyFans meets Instagram.
Imagine your Instagram if you only saw fitness all the time, but then you could watch a workout, and if you were intrigued by it, literally jump in and start doing it with them.
Right. So, and that, I mean, you just explained it even better than I can. I mean, I think that ultimately what I'm trying to find is let's get people into fitness without a goal that's 6 weeks away. And that's how most people start. So this is the whole use every part of the pig concept that I love. So I love this idea that because we want to operate super efficiently, which you have to do when you're an entrepreneur. So I think as a trainer, what I'm trying to do is say, listen, I'm not necessarily the platform that everyone's going to jump to that already has a brand and an established brick and mortar that is looking to deliver it. They'll use it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
and that's my
I will totally
clientele.
use it for my future gym.
But I think that the future of the platform really lies in the idea that you don't have a book of business when you're a trainer that allows you to laterally move through the industry and gain knowledge. So to give the breakdown of like how it is like a developer, if I want to become a developer, I learn a bunch of shit online, very similar to how a lot of trainers start, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? Learn a bunch of stuff online, and then I go somewhere and I say, I think I could do this job for you. And they say, you don't have enough applied experience. And I say, okay, how would I get applied experience? And they say, go build a website. I'm making this up. It's for the illustrative. So I go build a website, and then I show it to them. And they go, wow, that's actually a pretty nice website. Okay, you can come work here, right? And I go work there, and I work there for 3 years. And then I'm ready to be like, you know what? The product's okay. The people are okay. I'm ready for something new. I just want to know what it's like to be a back-end engineer. Right now I work all on the front end. I want to know what the back-end's like. So the next job that I apply for, I already have a salary that's comparable to wherever I'm going to make. So making that lateral move is like, hey, this is what I'm working on now. Here's the website you can go to see all my work, and I'm interested in working for your company. Now there's like a one-to-one comparison of like, oh, wow, this is what they get. This is how much they paid, and I know that they're going to love it. You're a trainer. and you go build up a book of, and I know I'm kind of tweaking right on your pain points here, but it's like you go to a gym and you build their book of business, because the only way to make money in fitness right now, truthfully, as an entrepreneur, is as an entrepreneur. You have to do it all, or else you're getting paid $25 to $60 an hour to do a class, right? And the problem is that when that class is over, the fitness is just as good, but no one can ever experience it again.
Right.
And I think that that's what Peloton is proving to people. It's like, no, they're not new. This isn't new. Recorded workouts aren't new. My mom used to do Galad in the 80s.
Yeah, look at, or like P90X or shit like that.
P90X is one of my favorite case studies, because they launched and had a multi-million-dollar brand on, wait for it, I'm going to say this nice and close, 12 videos.
That's insane.
12 videos on a multi-million-dollar brand. So when a trainer comes to me and says, I don't see the point of doing this, I'm only going to make that. And I'm like, if you don't see the point, we have a long way to go. And now I know that I have to educate trainers and saying, like, let me show you how to build staying power.
Right.
So going back to that every part of the pig, it's like, I need to find out the ways that you could just cook bacon, but I also need to find out the ways that you can cook the meat of it and then use every other piece as the feeders, as the little dollars here and there, because there is a big gap between the person that's willing to follow you on Instagram and willing to pay you $99+ a month for nutrition or counseling.
Exactly, huge.
And
like
not being able to identify those people, because I follow you. I may never pay you for fitness, but I follow your Instagram because I'm interested in you.
Sure.
You don't know, by looking at your Instagram, how many of those you can monetize.
I don't.
You
I
can
have
guess,
no idea.
But you don't know.
Yeah.
If there was a separate place for them to follow you and say, hey, listen, I'm actually probably monetizable, but not at the price point you're at.
Exactly.
Now you get the opportunity to say, wow, I actually have, so let's say so there is this concept of being a member or a follower on Studio.
Okay.
And the idea is that when the person comes in, they say, I'm ready to do what you do or see what you do, but I'm not ready to pay you for it yet.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm auditing your stuff.
Okay.
And you may have stuff on there that's for free, right? And here's the beauty of it.
Because
this
that's
is
what
where
Instagram is. Like, Instagram is essentially, like, for me, I treat Instagram like this free book. Like, here's my free platform.
It's your ebook. And so now I look at it like, plus there's no way to direct market on Instagram.
Right.
Exactly. So cool, you have 35,000 people.
It
Show me their
doesn't
email
even matter.
addresses.
Yeah, I don't have them.
Show me how you segment them. And I think that emails are kind of like the perfect way to build the list and actually show another person value.
Yes.
Like, if you come to me and you say, I have 50,000 Instagram followers, that could mean anything from you paid for them to you being like the best person ever.
Exactly.
Because I know people that have hundreds of thousands of dollars in businesses that are have 30 to 40,000. I know a guy who put a bunch of these videos up just like we're doing now.
Yeah.
And sells them to gyms, and he adds new ones every month, and he's making over $200,000 a month.
Easy.
And it's just him.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, when you look at something like that and you know, and I think that once you start playing in the realm of wanting to own your own business, you meet and see behind the curtains of these things, and you go, oh my God, I'm ready to do it. And people like us, the first thing we want to do is like, no, you should do it too. Like, come with me. Like, this is actually kind of cool. Like, you guys we could all benefit from this. And everyone else is like, I don't want to do my own thing. I'm good. You go do it. Like, let me see you do it first. And that was another principle that I brought into the platform, which is, how do I appease the person? And so the huge underlying foundation of Studio as a platform for both producers and consumers is meet people where they're at.
Yep.
That's what I'm driving towards, which is whether it's
Doesn't
on your
that go
fitness
back
journey.
to empathy?
Yeah, right. It's like, how can I get upset with you for telling me what you think is right about business? You just don't know. So I'll expand your mind. And if at the end of it you think it's valuable, then come on the platform. Sure. And if you're already doing it and delivering it, that's the other thing. I don't believe that this is a zero-sum game. I am not of the mindset that there is a definitive amount of fitness and that one person winning means other people losing. I think that this is a market wherein I can grab a decent market share that creates a cult-like following that's like people that really get it, and I'm going to have to, right? Because if I'm like, this is not a
for
6 month thing. This is a 1 year,
Right.
2 year, 5 year, 10 year thing. So it's like, how do you start to bring people along on this journey with you? Well, you differentiate on something specific, right? You try to give them like, hey, this is the angle. And that's kind of what I'm doing differently. I'm taking a different angle. The features are going to look the same for the first 6 months.
Right.
But but if you know where the platform's going, and that's what I challenge all my competitors to say, like, what are you building that they don't know they want yet? That's my favorite question to ask early people on, right? And they don't answer it to me because they want me to sign an NDA or something like that. Like, I'm going to steal their idea. Stop with that NDA bullshit. I don't care. I'd rather not hear about your product, to be honest. So, but at some point, that's just stuck for me from an early software developer told me. He's like, if you play the follow game, which is like I see a feature that you like somewhere else and I rebuild it for you here, you'll always be a step behind.
Right.
You can't possibly get out ahead. No. And so my goal is to not just be a step ahead of my customer, like of my competitors. I want to be a step behind of the customer. It's impossible to be in front of the customer because you give the customer every single thing that they want, and they're like, "Cool, I want that plus times 2." And you're like, "What?"
Look at the iPhone.
Right, because people don't actually know what they want.
Right.
Deep down, self-awareness is a part of it. Like, you have to know what you want. So you come to me and you don't know what you want, and I give you something you like. You say, cool, you know what would be even better? Because now you're getting excited about it too, right? It's like you.
Every time we talk.
Oh, what if we did this? And what if we... And because you see the way that... Well, that's about laying a foundation where in that exploration can happen. So you take a trainer who says, I'm not ready to start my own business. That's who I want.
Right.
You want to make some money? Let me show you how that same 15 hours that you're doing right now, because you're already an IT staffing agent and you love it.
Yeah.
It's just not fun to talk about when you're having a drink on the weekends.
Exactly.
And that's why I think so many people find a second career in fitness
because it
it's
brings
way
them
more
like
exciting.
Personality.
It's a lot. Man, isn't it so much cooler to tell them how you had a client lose 50 pounds than it is to tell how you got some guy staffed at 150K at some firm. It just doesn't matter. Like when you told me, like, hey, I don't know if this is the same. I remember you called me like last week and you're like, I don't know if this is the same thing, but I really want to help like other trainers perform digitally because it is different. Like, and you did both, which is beneficial to like have done in person and then transform, because you're like, I know it worked in person. I know it's not all going to work here, but the same tendencies will be there. So you want to like, hey, well, cool. That's also on the platform. Right. Because to me, it's just a piece of content that you want to monetize.
Exactly.
And that's my goal.
And I need a way to deliver it.
That's it.
Yep. Exactly.
And it's a one centralized location. So I feel like when you meet people where they're at, you deliver incredible empathy, and you understand that not everybody wants to be a businessman, but that doesn't mean that the world can't get fitter while a person that's doing IT staffing helps 50 people a month doing it. Cool.
Awesome.
Do it here.
Yeah. That's so cool. Well, I've taken up so much of your time, Joe, but I knew we could talk forever. So I'm going to move to our lightning round. I wanted to make sure we got onto studio because we set out the podcast being like, let's talk about studio, and we didn't get there until like an hour, but it was great. So anyway, so I do a lightning round at the end of all of my shows. The questions are quick rapid fire, unless you want to expand on what I'm saying. Usually relates to some details that you've shared about yourself with me throughout the course of our conversation.
Cool.
All right. So favorite baseball team?
I have to say the Yankees because I've never been a fan of teams. I've been a fan of good baseball.
There you go.
So,
okay.
I grew up there,
like
so
that.
I'll give it to them.
I like that. Favorite sport to watch?
Ooh, that's tough because I don't really like watching sports. I know that sounds like super tough, but like I was the guy that didn't know anybody. That was like, oh, that's a cool guy. Like, how do you not know Tino Martinez?
Yeah.
And I'm like, just not interesting to me. So I guess my favorite sport would probably be the one I watch the most of now is football.
Cool.
I don't love it,
but
it's the most exciting to watch.
Yeah. Last book you read?
Ooh, finished?
Yeah.
Those are tough.
Okay.
I'm reading Supernatural. That's a super interesting book. The last one that I read that like really had an impact was the Paul Jarvis Company of One book. That book is like, I would recommend that to anybody that is even considering being an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Because it makes the world smaller for you. It's like, hey, it's not all about becoming the CEO of a 500-person company. You can actually run a really successful life thinking about terms that are like limit the scale that you can reach. So I think it's a super cool book.
What's the last podcast you listened to?
This was oh man, it's brand new. I wish I had my phone here so
That's
I could
okay.
recommend
You could tell
it.
us what it's about.
It was a guy, so I'm obsessed with how the brain works, and it was a guy that talks about how we create our own reality, like like the neurochemistry that actually goes into us creating our own reality,
like telling ourselves a story,
right? And like where ego falls into that story, and also like the constructs that you can control versus what you can't, because I think that that's actually a huge part of business that people kind of underestimate, which is knowing which levers you can and can't pull.
Yeah. I constantly, when I'm upset and I need to call one of my business mentors, the only thing they say to me is, you got to fucking calm down because you need to remember control what you can control.
Right. And then on top of that, what needs to be optimized? What needs to be gotten rid of? Like, for example, if I told you right now, hey, your life goal is to not have any stress ever, you would never succeed because it's impossible, because stress is not a negative thing. Stress is a reaction that our body has. So
that friction.
You can't control that. Not knowing that could put you down a really bad path for a really long time of trying to solve a problem that's not actually solvable. So understanding what can just be dialed down and what's an acceptable, like, I want to produce a product that has no customer support. It's impossible. No, it's actually impossible. It doesn't matter how big the team is, right? Like, so knowing which levers you're just trying to like, oh, I just want to bring down the amount of support. Here's an acceptable. Here's a threshold. Having that kind of knowledge is super helpful in this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What's your favorite workout move?
Oh, snatch.
A snatch. Me too.
It's not. Let me just say this. It's a terrible workout move. I didn't mean to. Don't do that.
You like
don't recognize
doing
it. It's my favorite thing to do because they're so complex.
I love it. And it's like there's so much power to it.
Right. Like if you get it, it's one of those things that I feel like it's like entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
You keep going and you keep failing. And then when you get it right, it was effortless.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, that actually didn't take the same amount of work.
Like for me, like, cause I'd snatch with just like a dumbbell, but when it comes to like a barbell movement, for me, that's a clean because I can't get it tight enough. And so like when I do get it right and it feels so different, it's like very, very
that
satisfying.
path is so smooth.
Yeah, exactly.
So now it's probably bench.
Yeah.
Because it's the easiest. And I got to bench in the back.
There you go. Cool. And it's efficient. So we'll give you that. What is, if we're listening to this podcast a year from now, so on December 31st, 2021, where is Joe going to be?
A year from today?
Yeah.
I would hope that by a year from today, I'm well on my way to bringing more of the consumer onto the platform. Okay. I think that over the next year, I'm going to have a lot of focus on the trainer
producers.
And not to say that I won't build both like at the same time, but I think a year from today, it would be super cool to start shifting my focus because the trainers get it. Yeah. Right? Because if I can,
you have to do a lot of groundwork to get them to get it.
If I can educate people in a year, and that's the thing. It's like, so the famous quote of most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10. So thinking about something and saying like, I'm going to give myself a couple months to do it. It's like, oh man, you don't even know what's going to happen the next couple months.
Look at COVID.
But a year, I could educate people in a year and have like some sort of education where it's like just be self-serving. Sure. And I would love to shift my focus to the larger demographic.
And I also think too, like it's what I just said about like creating this network of trainers who get it, because like now that I understand it, I've told 10 people about it.
And I hope that people listen to this.
Exactly.
And I know that trainers listen to you, even if they don't want to admit it, right? Like, because that's what everybody does. Like, ooh, I heard everything they said, but I'm not going to tell them. Yeah. And then they start telling people about it. And I hope that generates a call, because at the end of the day, I don't actually need you to be on studio. That's not my goal. Is for you to be happy and make money in something that you probably aren't making money doing now. So like, if you're fine, cool. If you love your platform, do it and tell other people about it. But if someone's struggling and they're looking to just make some side income, or they're looking for a way to just pad it a little bit, so this is where all of my marketing is going. I'll give you my marketing play for the whole 2021. The 2021 marketing play for producers is, it's time to make your fun money. Well, I think that's the perfect place to wrap it up on. So, this has been so much fun. Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it. And last thing is just give us your shameless plug. Where can we find you? I know you have a couple of accounts for studio. Where can we interact with you online? Like, what's the best way to reach you? Yeah, I've been working on that a lot. So the easiest way to reach me is probably through email still, which is just joe@flexx.co. But really, Flexx with 2 X's, but we'll put it in the show notes. But I think that there's going to be a better one coming out soon. Okay. I'm going to do a lot more on Instagram now. Awesome. So at Joe Tebaldi, I'm sure it'll be tagged in here. Yep. Like that's probably the way now. Like that's what you'd want to follow to see what's coming. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. And guys, if you enjoyed this episode, any ounce of it resonated with you, whether you're a fit pro, entrepreneur, just somebody who maybe wants to find their fun money, please share this with people. More than leaving a review on a podcast, it's important to share it. If we can get as many ears to this episode as possible, that is going to be the difference maker in this message getting out there. So tell everyone you know, put it on your social media channels. If you have 5 followers or a couple 100,000, it literally doesn't matter, which we hope is a takeaway from this episode. And if you want more of all things The Fix, you can check us out on Spotify and Apple. And of course, via Instagram is the best way to reach me. I will always be happy to slide into the DMs and accept somebody sliding into mine. So hit us up and I will definitely get back to you as soon as I can. Have an awesome day.